Hello there, my fellow myth and fantasy nerds. My name is Tanner, and I'd like to welcome you back to my YouTube channel. So for this week's video, I had the great idea to tell you a story from Greek mythology about a rather famous hero. Now, back in the ancient Greek days, this hero was known as Heracles, which is the name I'll be using for this video. However, we in the modern day know him better by the name the Romans later gave him, that being Hercules. Now, one of the more well-known legends of this legendary hero is the story of the 12 Labors, and that's the story I decided to tell this week. However, like with all my other myth and legend and fairy tale retellings, linked to the playlist up in the cards and in the description down below, I will be keeping this story as close to the original as possible, while taking some creative liberties when and where it's necessary. Also remember, a good story has many retellings and variations, and this is merely one of them. So as always, please make sure to leave a like on this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe down below. Pretty please. It'll help me make more content for you. And without further ado, here is Heracles' 12 Labors. Heracles, son of Zeus and hero of mankind, came to his senses and looked in horror upon a massacre. His wife Megara and their 2 sons were torn to pieces by someone with great strength. He knew that his stepmother, the goddess Hera, was behind the madness that had come over him. But he knew that even though she was behind the madness, the wicked deed was his own to atone for. In order to find out what he must do to make amends, Heracles sought the knowledge of the oracle at Delphi. Great oracle, what must I do to be forgiven of my sins? The oracle replied, Go to your cousin, the High King Eurystheus. He will have 10 tasks for you to undergo, and if you wish to atone, you must do all the tasks to his satisfaction. Only when all 10 tasks are complete will your sin be atoned for. Heracles was not a fan of his cousin, King Eurystheus, due to the way Hera fiddled with a prophecy by causing Eurystheus to be born before Heracles, thereby taking the high kingship away from him. All this because her husband Zeus cheated on her with a mortal again, thus causing Heracles to be born. However, the oracle was very clear on this matter, so Heracles followed the advice. He traveled to the city of Tiryns and knelt before the High King. Your Majesty, he said, I have killed my wife and children in a fit of madness. For my atonement, I come to you to do 10 labors. Whatever you wish me to do, I will do, no matter how big or small a task. King Eurystheus smiled wickedly. 10 labors, you say? Excellent. Eurystheus was a paranoid sort, and was afraid that unless something deadly happened to his famous cousin, said cousin might try and take over the throne. So now that he, the High King, could give his cousin any 10 tasks to do, he could possibly get his cousin out of the way, and therefore keep the throne to himself. My first task. In the nearby territory of Nemean, there is a powerful magical lion rampaging and making trouble. I would like for you to go and destroy it. Heracles bowed and made his way to Nemean. Needless to say, the Nemean lion, the monster he had to face, was no ordinary lion. It had fur the color of gold that broke arrows and shattered swords. The only weak point Heracles could find was knocking it on the head with a club, stunning it, and then taking the huge feline and wrapping his arms around its neck in a chokehold. Soon enough, the lion moved no longer. With some divine inspiration from his half sister, the goddess Athena, Heracles took one of the Nemean lion's claws, skinned it, and wore the hide back to King Eurystheus' palace as a cloak. King Eurystheus was so frightened by the warrior in the lion skin cloak, he hid inside a decorative pot in his throne room. From inside the pot, the High King gave Hercules his next task. In the province of Lerna, there is a monstrous multi-headed serpent called the Hydra. It has been killing our people and our livestock. It is said that 8 of its 9 heads can be killed, but the ninth is immortal. Also, when you cut off one head, 2 more grow back to replace it. Find a way to kill it, or at the very least drive it away from here, and your second task will be complete. Heracles made his way to Lerna, accompanied by his nephew Iolaus. When they found the Hydra mucking about in the nearby swamps, Heracles and Iolaus had to figure out a way to destroy the 8 mortal heads without them growing back. Unfortunately, when the serpent goes from having 9 heads to having 17 heads in the span of about 5 minutes, figuring out how to destroy it permanently becomes that much harder. Finally, Iolaus had a brilliant idea. "Uncle," he said to Heracles, "I brought some torches with us. What if, after you cut off one head, I use the torch to sear the next stump before the 2 heads grow back?" Heracles figured it was a good plan as any, so they set to work. Heracles would slice off one head, and then Iolaus would sear the stump with the lit torch before the 2 replacements would grow. Finally, the only head left was the one immortal head. Heracles wrapped the immortal head at the base, and he hammer tossed the whole thing so hard it landed among the stars, becoming the Hydra constellation we still see to this day. Heracles also took the remaining Hydra heads, milked the venom out of every single one, and coated the tips of his arrows in the substance. When Heracles went back to King Eurystheus and showed him some of the severed Hydra heads, King Eurystheus gave him his third task. "Enough killing for now. There's a beautiful deer, the Ceryneian Hind. I want you to find her and bring her back to me, alive." Heracles tracked the hind for months. The hind was fast enough to outrun an arrow, and though she was a female, she had beautiful golden antlers sprouting from her head, and hooves that glittered like bronze. Heracles also knew the hind was sacred to his half-sister Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. He pleaded with his sister to take the hind with him to King Eurystheus and prove he finished his task. "Very well," the goddess said to him. "I will let you take my hind to the High King, as long as you let her free when you've finished." As soon as King Eurystheus laid eyes upon the beautiful deer, he told Heracles he wanted to put her on display in his menagerie. Heracles was about to refuse point blank when a particularly clever idea came to him. "Very well, cousin. You may have her in your menagerie, as long as you can catch her." He set the hind down. "Be wary, though, she's quite—" As soon as her hooves hit the palace floor, the hind disappeared in a blur of gold. Fast. King Eurystheus became upset that his pet had disappeared on him, so he made himself better by giving Heracles his next task. "In Erymanthus, there's a wild boar that's been causing all sorts of havoc. I want you to find this boar and bring him back to me alive." Heracles made his way to Erymanthus, and there he met an old friend of his, a centaur named Pholus. "Very simple," the centaur advised, after Heracles told him what he must do. "Up on Mount Erymanthus there's a deep ravine filled with snow. This snow should be deep enough this time of year that you should be able to use it as an effective trap against the boar." Heracles thought this was sound advice, so he lured the Erymanthian boar all the way to the top of the mountain and into the ravine Pholus told him about. Sure enough, the Erymanthian boar fell into the ravine and got buried in the deep snow at the bottom. It was still alive, but no matter how hard the boar thrashed, it was well and truly stuck. Heracles slowly dug the boar out of the snow, tying up its hooves in the process, and hauled it back to King Eurystheus. The fifth task Eurystheus gave to Heracles was to head to the territory of Stymphalia. They're having a particularly difficult problem with a flock of wicked birds. They've settled near the Stymphalian lake, and the townsfolk have been ravaged by them. Your task is to drive them away and rid the lake of every single bird." Heracles made his way to Stymphalia, and he discovered the flock of birds he'd been told about. Their feathers glinted silver, like metal. Their beaks and talons were blade-like in appearance and seemed razor-sharp. And as Heracles watched, any small animal that came near one of the birds was suddenly taken down by a barrage of feathery projectiles, until their entire body was pierced through with feathers thrown like darts. Heracles wasn't sure how to take them down. However, a little divine inspiration from Athena, and Heracles came up with the perfect plan. Using a bronze noisemaker she gave him, he would startle the birds with loud noises, and then used his bow and poisoned arrows to take them down, a few at a time. A few rounds of this later, and the remaining birds decided this wasn't a safe place to roost, and they took off, never to be seen again. King Eurystheus grew more and more annoyed. With every monster Heracles faced, he became more and more famous, and thus more and more of a threat to the throne. So this time, he went for a different approach. "Go to the territory of Elis. My friend King Augeas, son of Helios, is famous for his cattle. However, the man is quite lazy, and the stables have gone unmaintained for quite some time. I want you to go and clean the stables for him." Now, one thing you need to know about these cattle: they were descended from the Titan Helios' sacred animals. Therefore, not only did these particular cows possess hides the color of cherry-flavored Kool-Aid, they would also never get sick, no matter how clean or dirty their living situations were at the time. Therefore, King Augeas never really saw the point in trying to clean their stables, so he never did. Gross, I know. When Heracles got to the city of Elis, he made his way to the palace of Augeas and had a chat with the king. He promised the king that he could clean the stables in one day for only 1/10 of his divine cattle herd. The king wasn't sure this hero could clean the stables in one day, so he decided to take it as a challenge. "Very well. If you can clean my stables in one day, I will let you keep 1/10 of my prized cattle." What Heracles did next could be considered working smarter and not harder. What he did was dig a trench from the nearby river to the stable, and then another trench to another part of the river further down. As soon as he broke the small retaining wall he had left separating his trench and the river flowed through quick as you please and flushed 30 years' worth of divine cow manure from the stables, leaving nothing but gleaming walls and about 1,000 cows who had their scarlet hides power washed. King Augeas was impressed that Heracles had done what he said he would do, so he gave Heracles 1/10 of his herd as promised. At this point, King Eurystheus was running out of bad ideas to give Heracles. Very well, your next task is for you to go to Crete and convince King Minos to give up his prized bull. King Minos had a reputation for ruthlessness and a powerful army, so of course Eurystheus thought he could use them to get rid of Heracles for good. However, this would not be the case. You see, the Cretan bull was a gift to Minos from Poseidon, and he was supposed to sacrifice it, but didn't. The gods decided to punish him for going back on his promise by, having Queen Pasiphae fall in love with the beast. From that cursed union, the queen produced a son named Asterion, who would become the famous Cretan monster, the Minotaur. Needless to say, Minos' attitude towards the Cretan bull was sour, to say the least. So, when Heracles came and asked Minos if he could take the bull back to Tiryns with him, all Minos said to him was, "Sure, take it. Get it out of my sight." When Heracles brought the Cretan bull to King Eurystheus, the High King put on a show of nonchalance, but was secretly getting more and more aggravated with his cousin. For your next task, I want you to go visit King Diomedes of Thrace. I want you to convince him to give me 4 of his best mares. When Heracles met King Diomedes of Thrace, something immediately felt off about him. His gleaming eyes and his wide smile immediately gave Heracles the willies, almost as if he had a neon sign above his head that said, "Danger! Psycho King!" But Heracles swallowed his fear and suspicions and told the king what his cousin requested. King Diomedes was delighted by this request and brought Heracles to the stable where he kept his horses. Heracles nearly gagged when he saw them. The stables were so bad they made King Augeas' stables look like a 5-star resort. The floor was littered with bones, meat, and gristle. The horses' legs were chained to the floor with heavy manacles, and their hoofs were stained red with blood, though Heracles suspected it wasn't their own. Their eyes had a strange, malevolent kind of intelligence, and they snapped at Heracles with muzzles filled with razor-sharp teeth, which were also stained a bright red. "Do you like them?" Diomedes asked. Heracles turned, and he saw that he was surrounded on all sides by Diomedes and around 50 of his soldiers. "I have to keep them chained up, you see. My babies are some of the strongest horses in all the land. As you might have guessed, they don't eat grass or hay or oats like other horses. These horses love the taste of fresh meat." Heracles tried to play it cool, even though internally his danger sense was going off more than it had ever before. "Okay, so I can see why my cousin would like a couple of them. Do we have a deal or not?" Diomedes grinned wider. "Oh, but I'm sorry, my dear sir. I'm afraid your journey is at its end. You see, it's feeding time, and you just become the main course. The guards drew nearer and nearer as Diomedes said this. Oh, don't take it personally, I beg you. I've done this to most of my uninvited guests. In fact, some of my invited ones as well, and most of my prisoners, and even a few of my relatives. He snapped his fingers, and the guards sprang into action. The Thracian warriors never stood a chance. One by one, Heracles knocked them out and threw them into the stables, where they were overpowered by the carnivorous horses. Soon enough, only King Diomedes was left. Well, I needed them out of the way anyway, he said, giggling nervously. Thank you for feeding my horses. I never really meant for you to be the main course. Why don't we just let bygones be bygones? In response to this, Heracles gave King Diomedes his just deserts by essentially turning him into his horse's dessert. After their 51-course meal, the mares were so full they grew sleepy and tame, kind of like you and your relatives after Thanksgiving dinner. They were now tame enough that Heracles could chain the 4 best mares and take them to Eurystheus. However, the mares frightened Eurystheus something fierce, and so he had them released into the wild to live out the rest of their days. At the time, there were other troubles for King Eurystheus. His daughter Admeta was begging and pleading and whining, wanting a new golden sash to go along with her new dress. Eurystheus was tired of his daughter's begging, but she unintentionally gave him an idea for the next task. Heracles, my daughter wants the best belt in all the land to go along with the new dress she bought, and I cannot think of a belt any finer than the one belonging to Hippolyta, queen of the Amazon warriors. I would like you to travel to Amazonia and bring back Hippolyta's belt. Heracles traveled to the land of the Amazons, a lineage of powerful, all-female warriors, and hoping to avoid conflict as much as possible, met with Queen Hippolyta under a flag of truce. My queen, he said, bowing to the warrior, I come here to fulfill a request made by my cousin, the High King of Mycenae. All I ask is that you give me your golden sash, so that my cousin's spoiled, rotten daughter can have a belt that goes with her dress. At first, Hippolyta was outraged at this. Her golden sash was a gift to her by her father, the war god Ares. But when it became clear that Heracles hated this task even more than she did, she felt almost a sense of pity on the man. She even gathered intel on him and learned of the other tasks he had done. So, you captured the Ceryneian hide once. Yes, this is true. And you promised Artemis that when you were done with it, you would return it to her alive and well? Yes. And did you keep your promise? I did. Hippolyta smiled. Artemis is our patron goddess, so keeping your promises to her bodes well for you. If I do give you my belt, do you swear to bring it back to me when your cousin's daughter is done with it? Heracles gave her a smirk. I think that's doable. If things were different, Heracles and Hippolyta could have been a match made on Olympus. They could have settled down and raised a family of very powerful warriors. However, thanks to Hera's meddling, it wasn't meant to be. Hera kept hoping King Eurystheus would get rid of their mutual enemy without her help, but now this hero was about to finish another task. And she just couldn't have that now, could she? So she disguised herself as an Amazon warrior and spread distrust among the other Amazons, while Heracles and Hippolyta got to know each other better. "It's a trap," she whispered to them. "Heracles is going to kidnap the queen and take her hostage." Of course, the Amazons were already very suspicious of men, so Hera's whispering definitely didn't help anything. Finally, Hippolyta's sister, Penthesilea, drew her sword and said, "Something's wrong! The queen's been talking to that man for far too long. She must be in danger. To arms, Amazons, for treachery is at hand." Well, you can imagine Heracles' and Hippolyta's surprise when they learned the Amazons were charging. And when Hippolyta saw her sister leading the charge, she said, "What is the meaning of this, sister?" "We are saving you from this treacherous man," came the reply. Hippolyta, trying desperately to nip this in the bud, tried convincing her warriors that this was a mistake, but they just couldn't listen to reason. She quickly took her sash and gave it to Heracles, saying to him, "Go finish your tasks. I'll talk some sense into that." She never finished her sentence, as Penthesilea hurled a spear at Heracles, but struck Hippolyta down instead. Heracles ordered his men to retreat, and they left Amazonia as quickly as they could. Heracles threw the sash at Eurystheus's feet. "I hope you're happy. I tried to do things peacefully, but still, hundreds of brave and honorable warriors died for that sash." Eurystheus gave the sash to his daughter, and then he turned to look at Heracles again. "There's a monster in Iberia named Geryon. Rumor has it he killed King Augeas and took his cattle. I want you to kill him and bring those ruby-red cows to me." Now, what was called Iberia back in those days, we moderners know as the countries of Spain and Portugal. Heracles made his way there and came across a ranch, and sure enough, there was a pen with several ruby-red cows there. When he got there, he found his path blocked by a warrior, carrying an axe in one hand, and in the other he held one end of a leash with a two-headed dog on the other end. "Are you Geryon, who I was told about?" Heracles asked. "No," the warrior replied. "Geryon's my boss. My name's Eurytion, and this here is Orthrus, brother to Cerberus." The two-headed dog growled in response to his name. "I see," Heracles said. "I'm Heracles, and I've come all the way from Mycenae to bring these cows to my cousin, the High King of Mycenae." "Out of the question," Eurytion said. "My boss has given me strict orders to kill all trespassers on sight. Sorry you had to come all this way here to die." Of course, with one swing of his club, Heracles was the one who did the killing. As he turned towards the cows, he heard a commotion behind him. "What is going on here?" Heracles turned around and saw the strangest being he had ever seen. His arms, legs, and head seemed human enough, but otherwise he seemed to have three torsos side by side rather than just one. And by that I mean his head sprouted from the middle torso like a normal head, his right arm sprouted from the right shoulder on the right torso, and the left arm sprouted from the left shoulder of the left torso. So, in other words, he had two arms but four armpits. The bottoms of all three torsos joined together and became one pair of legs. Heracles had to pick his jaw off the ground when he saw this being. Are, are you Geryon?" So what if I am? What have you done to my rancher and his dog? I simply came here for the cows, and they wanted to kill me. I had to defend myself. No matter. Yes, I am Geryon, son of Chrysaor the Golden. Wait, Chrysaor is your father? Chrysaor, son of Poseidon and Medusa, brother of Pegasus? Geryon sighed. Yes, yes, my uncle's a flying horse, my grandma has snakes for hair, and my grandpappy rules the seas. Am I gonna get to kill you yet? Heracles and Geryon fought like fiends. However, Heracles quickly found out that no matter how much damage he did to Geryon, he would simply regenerate pretty quickly. What's going on? Why haven't your injuries stuck? Geryon laughed. I got 3 hearts and 3 sets of organs, moron. I can heal pretty quickly as long as you don't kill all 3 of my bodies at once. Oh, really? Heracles said. He dropped his club, rolled past Geryon, and fired an arrow through his armpit. The arrow sailed through all 3 of his bodies, and all 3 of Geryon's hearts felt the sting of Heracles' arrow. Heracles led the red cows to Eurystheus, and then said to him, That was my 10th labor. Am I done now? Eurystheus gave a sly smile. Not quite, dear cousin. I've recently discovered something about 2 of your tasks. You received help from your nephew when you fought the Hydra, is that correct? Yes, Heracles said, confused. And you received compensation when you helped King Augeas clean his stables? What does any of that have to do with my tasks? Why, my dear cousin, Eurystheus said, feigning disappointment, I'm afraid that means I'll have to disqualify those tasks. You still have 2 that you have to do for me. Are you kidding me? Heracles asked. Your next task is to travel to the island of the Hesperides. There's an apple tree there which is sacred to Hera and grows golden apples. I want you to go and pick me some of those golden apples. Heracles scowled. And where exactly is this garden? Somewhere to the farthest west. The Hesperides are nymphs of the sunset and daughters of the Titan Atlas. So I suspect if you wish to find it, talk to Atlas. Heracles wasn't sure where to start until he realized he could simply seek out another Titan, and they would probably know where Atlas was. So Heracles sought out Prometheus, the Titan of forethought and friendliest of the Titans, who was chained to a mountain with eagles pecking at his liver as punishment for giving fire to the first humans. Heracles chased the eagle away long enough for Prometheus to give him directions to the mountain where Atlas held up the sky. Great Atlas! Heracles yelled, over the sound of the enormous pillar of wind and sky that was propped on the Titan's back. I am Heracles, and I'm here to fulfill a request from the High King of Mycenae. What do you want? The Titan asked. I am to bring him apples from your daughter's garden. Prometheus told me you might be able to help. Atlas grunted a laugh. Well, since you helped my dear brother, I suppose I can help you. While I go get the apples, I'll need you to hold up the sky. Do you think you can do that? Heracles dropped his lion skin cloak. I can do it, but swear to me on the river Styx that you'll come back with the apples. Very well. I swear on the river Styx that I will come back with your apples. Now, swearing on the river Styx was the most powerful oath one could make, and was nigh unbreakable. If one were to break it, well, let's just say there would be literal Hades to pay. Heracles didn't trust Atlas as far as he could throw him, so of course he would have the Titan swear an unbreakable oath. Atlas handed over the sky for Heracles to hold, and he went and gathered the apples from the tree. As soon as he got back, Atlas paused, looking craftily at Heracles. You know, if you want me to, I could take these apples back to your cousin and give them to him if you just held on to the sky a little longer. Heracles knew this was merely a trick for Atlas to run and not look back, so he knew he had to be craftier. Fine, but could you take the sky back for a little bit? It's really hurting my back. And if I could fold my cloak and make it into a pillow, I think it would make this a bit more bearable. Could you real quick hold on to this while I do that? Atlas, thinking nothing of this, obliged. As soon as the sky was back on his shoulders, however, Heracles took the apples, wrapped them in his cloak, and ran as fast as he could. Thanks for the apples, Atlas! With angry shouting in the distance, Heracles ran back to the palace of the High King and plopped a bushel of golden apples in front of him. One final task for me, and then I am forgiven of my sins, Heracles told Eurystheus. Come on, give it to me so I can get it over with. Eurystheus thought long and hard about this final task. He had to make this last labor really count, make it truly impossible. Very well. Your last labor is to travel to the underworld and bring me Cerberus, the guard dog. Heracles thought this would be a difficult task indeed, but he knew he could either do the task and be done with it, or he could die trying. Turns out, finding the nearest entrance to Erebos and crossing the river Styx was a lot easier than he expected. As it turns out, Charon the ferryman had been following the Heracles story for quite some time, and he was a big fan. He led Heracles across the Styx free of charge, and told him where he needed to go to find Cerberus. Charon also advised him to talk to Hades and Persephone before he took Cerberus, and get their permission. Heracles took Chiron's advice and made his way to the palace of Hades and Persephone. My lord and my lady, Heracles said, kneeling before the king of the underworld and his queen, I am Heracles. We know who you are, Hades said. Your half-sister here. He gestured to Persephone, who was in fact Heracles' older half-sister through Zeus, has become enamored with these heroics you've been doing. Heracles blushed. Well, I'm flattered by the sentiment, truly. Unfortunately, I'm here on my final task. I meant to bring Cerberus, your guard dog, to my cousin, King Eurystheus. Do I have your permission to do so? Hades looked at Heracles, and then smiled. Can you take down my guard dog with no weapons? Heracles smiled back. I think I can do that. And do you promise to release him once your task is complete? Persephone asked. I will release him when I am released from my service. Then go, take Cerberus with our blessing, Hades finished. Heracles bowed and made his way out of the palace and towards the gates, where Cerberus stood guard. Of course, it would be hard to miss an enormous guard dog with 3 heads and a snake for a tail. Taking down Cerberus without using weapons was fairly easy for Heracles. He simply distracted them with a doggy biscuit, or whatever the ancient Greek equivalent was, and when the three heads argued over it, Heracles simply grabbed the chain hooked to Cerberus's collars and used it to essentially dog tie Cerberus into submission. Carrying the bundle of canine to Eurystheus took some doing, but eventually he made his way to the palace with the squirming bundle. This made Eurystheus shriek in terror and hide in the ornamental pot yet again. But from the pot he immediately said, "Fine, Heracles, your final task is done. You are released from my service. Please don't try to kill me or take the throne." Heracles scoffed as he released Cerberus like he promised. "Why would I do that? Being a hero is way more fun." Heracles would go on to have many more adventures and do many more heroic deeds. But those are stories for another time. And there we have it. That was the story of Heracles' 12 labors. Well, 10 plus a couple bonus tasks. If you liked this video and you want more, please consider leaving a like and subscribing down below so you don't miss any new content from me. Also, if you have any other ideas you want to see in any future videos, please leave your suggestions in the comments down below. Who knows? It might just happen. Alright, well, that's all the time I have for this video, so I'll see you all next week with some brand new content for ya. See you guys then.